Welcome to the Police Accountability Board regular meeting from Wednesday, April 26, 2023. The PAB Public Advisement. The PAB has resumed in-person meetings and encourages community members to attend in person. Community members attending in person should observe the health and safety protocols for in-person meetings of Berkeley boards and commissions as outlined by the City of Berkeley. The PAB acknowledges that physical attendance may not be feasible for all community members. To this end, the Office of Director of Police Accountability has been exploring the option of allowing for remote participation at the PAB meetings. Please note that the ODPA and the PAB are in the early stages of implementing this hybrid meeting format, so there is a possibility for technical glitches and errors. Your patience and understanding are greatly appreciated. To access this meeting remotely, join from a PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or Android device using this URL listed below. If you do not wish for your name to appear on the screen, use the drop-down menu and click on Rename to rename yourself to be anonymous. To request to speak, use the raise hand icon on the screen. To join by phone, dial 1-669-90683 and enter 826-5359-6072. If you wish to comment during the public comment portion of the agenda, press *9 and wait to be recognized. Land acknowledgement. The City of Berkeley recognizes the community we live in was born on the territory of the Chun, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chichin. Speaking of Lonely people, the ancestors and descendants of the sovereign Verona band of the Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to all the Ohlone tribes and descendants of the Verona band. As we begin our meeting tonight, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of Berkeley, the documented 5,000-year history of vibrant community at the West Berkeley Shellmount, and the Berkeley and the Ohlone people who continue to reside in this space. We recognize that Berkeley residents have and continue to benefit from the use and occupation of this unceded stolen land since Berkeley's incorporation in 1878. As stewards of the laws regulating the City of Berkeley, it is not only vital that we recognize the history of this land, but also recognize that the Ohlone people are present members of Berkeley and other East Bay communities today. Which brings us to the agenda and the call to order.
We'll wait.
Call to the roll call, Chair. Yes. So Chair Moore.
Present.
Vice Chair is absent excuse absent. Board Member Owens.
Here.
Board Member Calavita is absent with the approved leave. Board Member Lethbridge
Here.
and Board Member Levine.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum established.
We also, this who's present from BPA and BPD.
Yes, from BPD, we have Captain Durbin joining us remotely. We have Lieutenant Reese in person with us at the North Berkeley Center. And we have from BPA Officer Graham Chivas, who's joining us. From the City Attorney's Office, we have a new addition to our team, Stephen Hylas, who will be in a short introduction later on.
Excellent. Thank you, Director. Which brings us to agenda item number 2, the approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any questions or concerns, criticisms, anything needs to be moved or changed?
I make a motion, we approve it. I'll second that.
That is moved. Did you get that, Director?
Motion by Board Member Owens, seconded by Board Member Levine.
Correct.
Lethbridge.
Sorry.
Begins with an L.
Which brings us to our agenda item number 3, which is public comment.
Okay, Chair Moore, we don't have any members of the public present with us. Here at the North Berkeley Center, if we have members of the public that are joining us remotely, please feel free to raise your hand icon so we can acknowledge you and give you an opportunity to speak to the board. Chair Moore, at this time, I don't see any raised hand icons in the Zoom webinar.
Okay, thank you. And Not seeing or hearing any comments from the public, that brings us to agenda item number 4, the approval of the minutes from the regular meeting on April 11th, 2023. Is there any changes, additions?
I move that we approve the minutes. I'll second it.
Excellent.
Okay, motion by board member Lethwish and seconded by board member Holmes. Do we have unanimous consent there?
We do.
Minutes approved.
Brings us to agenda item 5, ODPA staff report.
Thank you, Chair Ward. As noted as the agenda, we have one additional person that's joined the city of Berkeley from the city attorney's office. And he has been assigned to our group to assist us with any legal matters. We have Mr. Stephen Hylas. If you want to share any comments, floor is yours.
Sure. I'm Stephen Hylas. I joined a few weeks ago from a private firm in San Francisco. And I'm looking forward to working with all of you on legal issues that might arise.
Thank you. For other announcement, I know board member Owens checks in on me with our staffing updates. I am happy to say that we have the final background check completed for our investigator. He'll be starting next week. It was a really a competitive process. We had close to 20 applicants, and we interviewed from that eligibility list. 4 of them, our internal candidate was not, she withdrew from the process. But we are happy to announce Jason Wechter will be joining the team. You may have seen him or recognize his name. He's a seasoned investigator. He's a NACO board member, and he's the one that's spearheading right now the investigators forum that is taking place monthly. He has experience in this field in both San Francisco and Oakland. And really he's been a leader in this field when it comes to new agencies training for investigators. Anytime they call NACO or the new jurisdiction, Jason's usually there to provide some gentle overview of what to do in investigative models. So I'm really excited about him. We'll be going to a work conference next week on constitutional policing, but I'll try to debrief from there on how he has to hit the ground running, which I'm sure he will be able to. But once he comes at the next meeting, he'll be able to introduce himself to you and give you more about his background. We have also had the full eligibility list for the management analyst positions. That's the classification that we're using for the data analyst and for the policy analyst. So I'm going through the eligibility list, and I'll be having the interviews or inviting candidates for those interviews, and then I'll keep you abreast of that progress. If you recall, we announced the NACO webinar that took place earlier this week. It was from legal scholar Joanne Schwartz from UCA School of Law and author of the recently published book, Shielded: How the Police Became Untouchable. She presented on that work. The webinar delved into why civil rights litigation so rarely leads to justice that prevents future police misconduct. So if and when that webinar becomes available, I encourage you to review it and also to pick up the book. I haven't picked up the book yet, but I'm certainly interested from the webinar. We have forwarded the supplemental memorandums to the Public Safety Committee, which met earlier this week. We gave the stamps again of where they are. They have passed it. They passed a qualified positive motion to send it to the full council to consider. They are still reviewing the board's recommendation on the data retention issue. So that's going to go through a legal review. And then that was the purpose for that positive qualified, motion, so. But that is the status of Chair Moore was present. I don't know if you wanna add anything to that.
I will later.
Okay. And we also forwarded the recommendation on the public equipment and community safety ordinance. The safety reports of that will then it has been received by BPD and then will be sent to council, which then they will then consider adopting or approving rather the report, that annual report. Does anybody have any questions or concerns at this time that I can address?
I do.
Okay.
A couple of things. One was on commendations. I know that in prior years, what's happened is we've received like a huge stack of commendations each year. And it takes an inordinate amount of time to go through them. And I think it happened last year here. I know it happened during the PRC. And so I think I had suggested that we get them at least twice a year so that we can look at them more closely. And so I don't know if you've received them yet from the department or what?
I have not, and if there's some process that I was not aware, like if they uploaded somewhere, I should know. I'm gonna check up on that, but I have not seen an email. So I don't know if Captain Durbin or Lieutenant Reese has any comment about the accommodations process. Okay.
I can follow up on that. I know I can make a note of that and follow up on that. I hear what the desire is. Get them twice a year, is that correct?
Yeah, that
Okay.
would be great. And then the second thing was about protocol around subcommittee communications with the department. I don't know if there's some protocol, but it seems like all communications must come from the director and go to the chief. Which, since you're both so busy, it ends up, causing a bottleneck of communication. For example, with the body worn camera subcommittee, we met a few weeks ago, and we were going to request that someone from the department join us at the next subcommittee meeting so that we could, we had questions and want their input, and that was supposed to take place Monday, but the communication didn't go out. And I had offered just to send something out right away. So I don't know what the, perhaps it could be that the chair of a subcommittee maybe run something by our chair or by you, but some kind of protocols to make our communications more efficient, I think would be helpful.
Hey, I know that, yeah, and I apologize because I was the bottleneck at BWC. We did, when I was in Charlottesville and even in Fairfax, we put some sort of internal procedure in place, and I'm more than happy to empower you guys. I don't need to necessarily send every email if you prefer it that way. So I think we just need to make sure we're all set on the procedure, so every subcommittee member knows and we follow that protocol. So by next meeting, we'll workshop something and then we present to the full board.
That would be great. Thank you.
So can I chime in on this conversation? Because I think this will tie into the director's item on the agenda later about a communication staff member. So I think that, that's maybe something that gets looped in with that process. So I'd like to come back and kind of loop it in to that process. Talk about.
It's a great point.
Yeah.
We'll put a pin in it and get back to it.
Okay.
Is there anything else, Director, you want to address, or is there any other questions for the director at this time?
Those are my reasons.
Not seeing or hearing any at this time, I'm going to move to agenda item number 6, which is Chair and Board Members Report. And let me start first by apologizing for missing the April 11th meeting. Circumstances were beyond my control, but I'm thankful for the Vice Chair stepping in, and I was still doing the work of this committee, trying to get us some answers and some allies. And unfortunately, it took time away from the board and my responsibilities. So for that, I apologize directly to the board and the community. At the same time, I also want to address the Public Safety Policy Subcommittee that I attended with the chair and with policy analyst, Barilla, there was quite a lot of confusion in the subcommittee and,
Which
just,
subcommittees?
we were brought for the
Public safety.
Public Safety Policy Subcommittee of the council. And we were there, I would, please, Director, help me if my description of the circumstances is off, but we assumed that we were we were listening to the ongoing conversation we were having with police and policy and this safety subcommittee about the memo that we had sent. And so we thought we were having a reply conversation, but what they wanted us to do was defend the memo. Is that correct? Is that? So-
You just said that like a sentence.
But the committee asked us to in fact defend the memo when we were coming to have a conversation about what they thought about our memo. So there was a little confusion on who was presenting what to who. But at the same time, we got through the conversation. We have an understanding. I think we have to pay attention to this conversation as it unfurls. There's a lot of work that we're gonna do in sync with not only Berkeley Police, but with the BPA. And in this interest of working together, I want everyone to know this is where we're starting this process at, and let's keep it going for you. So unless you have anything else you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think before my takeaway is to be more proactive with that subcommittee and
Agree.
reach out with Pascal and Murillo, how we can be more proactive. I know he's scanning regularly when the agendas are for items that relate to us. Sometimes so we do get notice, but sometimes there's not a set schedule, so that makes it a little bit difficult. But we'll make sure that we ask, what are the expectations for us coming into the meeting? If you want us to put a PowerPoint or put one together, because it's interesting too that it wasn't that we were presenting on the follow-up memo, we were presenting on the original.
Right.
So that's where it was a little bit confusing.
It was.
And there was no real discussion about the additional work that we did. So that's, it's part of the package, but hopefully it gets resolved, so. But as I noted to the board, it seemed that the BPD did take some of the recommendations and did make some changes to their proposed policy.
Thank you, Director. So that's all for me. Is there any other board members that have any reports that they'd like to share at this time? Not seeing or hearing any, I'm going to bring us to agenda item number 7, which is Chief of Police report.
Hi, good evening. I will start with the topic of staffing. No significant changes since I think it was Lieutenant Tate that last presented to the board, but we do have quite a few officers and dispatchers in background investigations. We do have some officers that we hope to get, or officer applicants, recruits in the upcoming police academy in July. So we're hoping to get about half a dozen or 6 in that class, and hopefully a couple dispatchers will be hired as well. So we're making some progress. Lateral officer applicants still tend to be extremely difficult to attract. You may have seen a neighboring agency is now offering a $75,000 hiring bonus for a police officer. So it's getting more and more competitive. We offered and are still working through much smaller incentives, but those were reasonable and comparable bonuses that we offered at the time. But it's just it's really getting more and more competitive, and we're trying to keep up. Cases of interest and crime trends. Earlier this month, we made an arrest behind a sexual assault that occurred in the 2000 block of Blake Street on March 26th. Suspect in that case was charged with several felonies, including kidnapping by the Alameda County District Attorney's Office. That's good police work. On April 21st, a person was sitting in a car in the area of Ashby and Wheeler when he was shot at by the occupants of another vehicle. He was not struck. He was not injured, and the suspect got away, but we did locate evidence, and that investigation is ongoing. We had several robberies over the last several weeks. Guns were used by some of the suspects in those cases, and robberies in general are trending up this year. I'm told by our detectives who I spoke with earlier that we're trending back towards pre-pandemic numbers again in terms of our calls and calls for service. And as everyone here is well aware, catalytic converter thefts, felony retail thefts, they are definitely strong contributors to that uptick in crime we're seeing. In regards to policies and some other updates, the chair and director already covered the updates regarding the Public Safety Policy Committee meeting. What I can add there, which I'm not sure I heard, is that we have scheduled to get those policies in front of the full council on May 23rd. We did launch a new traffic safety page on the Berkeley Police Department Transparency Hub that covers calls for service, reported collisions, and traffic stop data. On that page, community members can also find a survey application where they can submit traffic-related concerns to the BPD Traffic Bureau. So we're interested and hopeful that engages or keeps our community engaged and us informed on traffic safety-related issues. So that's new to the Transparency Hub. Follow-up items from previous meetings. At the last meeting, Lieutenant Tate was asked the reason an officer recently separated from the department and whether or not we had an exit interview. And I can share the following from Chief Lewis. The officer who resigned was an officer who had been with the department approximately 7 years. He did participate in the exit interview and reported that he was resigning for a number of reasons, which included supporting his partner's profession and potential interest in pursuing a law degree. 2 meetings ago, I was asked about the process related to our early warning system quarterly audits, and specifically how frequently an officer could be audited. I checked with the sergeant, audit and inspection sergeant, and he explained to me the audit relies on a year's worth of data. So an officer may only be audited once a year. So therefore, if that officer's name is selected again within that year, his or her name would be put back into to be randomly not selected, but somebody else would be, so somebody else would be randomly selected in place of that officer because they need a year's worth of data. So you won't get more than once a year. Not sure if I explained that well, but I think I did. Also, the director mentioned that the 2022 Police Equipment and Community Safety Ordinance Annual Report, we received the comments. I just wanted to thank you for the feedback, and we are incorporating suggested edits, and we'll be bringing that to council in early June. So that's the only update there. The last update is we're in the process of, and it was also already touched on already, the body worn camera subcommittee. We struggle at times to make those selections on who are going to sit on those subcommittees because we want it to be somebody who it doesn't have too many, isn't overburdened with administrative tasks, but also somebody who's most well versed in the topic, but also getting some of our newer leadership that experience. But in this particular case, ultimately, because of the importance of the topic and the experience and the depth of the knowledge the person will need to have, the chief has decided that Captain Okies will be the on the subcommittee. He was originally on the project to start the body worn camera program and has the most knowledge on the topic. And that's all that I have.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and your report. But do you mind taking a few questions from the board?
Of course.
Excellent. Board Member Leftwich has a question.
Yes, thank you for that report. Two questions. The first one relates to Apple. I was down on 4th Street
Yes.
last weekend, and I noticed that there wasn't a police car in front of Apple. And I know there had been, and I remember asking Chief Greenwood a few years ago about that, and he had said that Apple pays for it, but officers are posted there. but not now. And I'm wondering if, first of all, if that's the case, that they aren't usually there. And if so, if it's because of the staffing shortages, because hearing about the staffing shortages, I kind of hate the idea of our officers being parked in front of Apple instead of being out on the streets.
Yeah, that's in part definitely, Chief Lewis did stop the, that we call extra duty employment work. And in part, it was because of the staffing situation that we have going on. There are some benefits that we found to having an extra officer in the city, though. I will say that we were dealing with that pretty well at the time, in that our commands, or excuse me, our watch commanders were able to pull those officers. So one could argue that it's almost better, though, to have somebody here knowing that they can be pulled in case something does happen. But ultimately, Chief Lewis recognized the situation and the burden that this extra work is having. The second reason would be that we didn't have a formal policy on extra duty employment at the time, and that policy has been wrapped up. But and we also just got a couple forms connected to that policy, a contract and an application, that are now available to third parties who would be interested in hiring the police department. But again, the staffing situation would have to be taken into consideration every time. So.
Right, okay, thank you. And then the second thing is, I just want to reiterate my request that the chief designate someone to serve as a liaison with our board. I had raised this a few months ago, and she was receptive at the time. And then her representatives have been here in subsequent meetings, and I keep reiterating the request. And they say that they will ask her.
Yeah.
And the reason for this is just to increase our respective efficiencies, because she's so busy. And it would be really helpful if there was somebody besides her that we could reach out to, who obviously in turn would consult with her as needed.
Yeah, I don't want to give you the same answer. I do know that there is some concern that with just having miscommunication or not always consulting or getting back. So she's a little, I think, a little hesitant in that space, just that if she knows myself, if it's always myself or her at this meeting, that we can take any of those requests. And we literally work next to each other, and we always interact on a weekly basis. So we know that nothing would be missed between the two of us, and we know we're here at these meetings. So.
Well, you're right. The idea, though, is in between meetings, if something comes up.
If something comes up like midweek.
Right, well, we meet every 2 weeks, so, right. And, you know, whether it's something like having someone assigned to a subcommittee, you know, so that was the idea. It wasn't just to answer questions at these meetings, but to be designated as somebody within the department who might not be as busy as she is.
Okay, yeah, and I apologize for the same response, but I can get you a firm response at the next meeting from her. Well, she'll be at the next meeting.
Okay, and perhaps it could be you and we CC her, so she's seeing it, but she's not the one who has to necessarily respond or something. But I appreciate you checking in with her about that again.
And I apologize for the runaround.
It's okay.
Does anyone else have any other questions that they can ask?
I had a question. Captain, are officers working mandatory overtime? And if they are, how long have they been doing that?
The mandatory overtime has, we've been able to limit that, and Lieutenant Reese, correct me if I'm wrong, to summer staffing. And that's been going on for the last at least the last year, or no, last 2 years, I think. And so we're most impacted during the summer months. As you can imagine, most of our staff want those months off for vacation. We did actually tighten up our vacation rules so that we would have a less dramatic period of 3 months of vacation, so that we would have vacation spread out more throughout the year. So that's a little hit to our officers because obviously they'd want the summer months off as well. But we think that will improve the staffing crisis and potentially keep that forced overtime down. Is that accurate, Lieutenant Reese? We're not doing it at the moment, but we can anticipate doing it again this summer.
Well, we're looking at that right now, and we're optimistic that we may not have to do mandatory overtime this summer. It's not a guarantee, but we're optimistic about it. And that's only because we have reduced the amount of officers that are working the streets. So if we were to keep our old levels with more officers, we probably have to. But now that we've reduced the beats and reduced the number of officers per team, we're thinking we can get by without it. But the bottom line is less cops on the street.
Right. Yeah, I just brought it up because I know that mandatory overtime is not only not fun, but it's very taxing and stressful for those people that are required to do it, including dispatchers when they have mandatory overtime. So I was just concerned about that, especially because you're not ramping up your staffing, fast enough, and what the impact is to, the officers and their morale if they have to do.
The
Mandatory
dispatchers
overtime.
have way more mandatory shifts.
Yeah,
They-
that's hard.
They've been on it for a long time.
And so you said that there has been a move towards incentives, I know for both dispatchers and sworn officers. Is there any movement on, did you say there was movement on hiring dispatchers as well?
Yeah, we have some in backgrounds as well. And so we're, as a percentage, we're even greatly more impacted with our dispatchers than we are officers, but just the actual numbers are smaller. But I think we're down, like we've been down 25, 30% dispatchers. I'd have to look, but yeah, we do have a few in backgrounds, and we're equally recruiting as hard for dispatchers as we are for police officer.
Are you finding incentives are helping at all with the dispatchers with
Well,
hiring?
we have not begun the incentive program yet. We're having some logistical issues. We are opening it up citywide because we want to have as many potential recruiters as possible, rather than just open it up to our own staff. But that's created some slowdowns in working out the logistics. So we think it's a good move, but it has slowed us down.
That's kind of frustrating. You want to get people in the seats as fast as you can, so. Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Are there any other questions? Director?
If I may, Captain Durbin, and I apologize if you mentioned it, but I saw some activity near the high school yesterday. Was that one of the events you covered in your report, or is that something you can speak to?
I am not sure what it was. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Lieutenant Reese is saying he's familiar with it, so he may be able to speak on it.
So it was not one of the cases spoken about. It was a person with a drug and mental health problem that was acting out in a very aggressive manner at the high school and being taken into custody and not cooperating.
Okay.
Was it a student?
No.
Thank you.
I only happened to see it out my window, so I'm just curious.
Yeah.
The other question I had for Captain Durbin or Lieutenant Reese, and I got this question from a member of the public actually today, and Lieutenant Reese, you just talked about it, that there's been restructuring on the patrol. Has that had any negative impact or any impact on the crime activity that you're seeing? Is there a reason, and I know different departments have made these kind of adjustments, but the member of the public was I guess expressed to me her concern that something like this would be made public, because it could be perceived as if it's inviting the criminal element to say, no, just less cops on the street. So was there any tactical concern there, or have you seen any impact on criminal activity since making that adjustment?
I'd say it's too early to say if there's impact on crime. it is more manageable, and I would think that that creates less stress on our sergeants who were constantly trying to make phone calls or staff what they knew was going to be understaffed, as well as our lieutenants. And so we just decided that it would be best to get in front of what was typically lower staffing every day anyhow, and create a system or a beat system that we knew was more equitably distributing the calls. So if you leave a beat open and you can reasonably anticipate that you're not going to have it filled, then now you're scrambling for the making sure that your resources are deployed effectively. So rather than just continuing down that path, we're just trying to get in front of it and alleviate some of the stress the sergeants and lieutenants had to deal with just trying to find minimum staffing.
Thank you for that. And the last question was regarding recruitment. And I apologize if that had been mentioned in this setting, but who would be like the assigned representatives for the department on recruitment? I know there's a recruitment page and interested candidates can just fill it out, and I'm assuming it leads them to somebody, but have you provided that information on who the leads on recruitment are in the department?
Yes, so the personnel and training sergeant is Rosie Jung, and she reports to Lieutenant Mel Turner, and they have now an ancillary recruitment team comprised of officers and dispatchers. And so any one of those members, as well as the sergeant and lieutenant, could field any inquiries by anyone interested in working in any job for the police department. And so in the past, we had a recruitment and retention team that was just officers. We purposely added and opened it up to dispatchers, knowing that we have just as much need to fill that role.
Thank you, sir. And no further question, Chairman.
And I wanted to add one other thing that came to my mind on the earlier question. The other thing that reducing the beats that we hope we'll have too is that if we do have additional officers, we can still staff them, but more specific tasks, whether it's a safety patrol or because we're having a particular problem somewhere. So we may still have the same staffing, but those officers might be assigned a specific task or a problem oriented issue that they're dealing with. So it doesn't always mean we have less cops here just because we have less beats, is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you, Captain Irvin. I appreciate that. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions before I move along here? Not seeing or hearing any other contributors, I'm going to go ahead and say we can move to agenda item number 8, which is subcommittee reports. I'd like to start with Chair Owens of the policy practices relating to downtown task force and bike unit allegations.
I'm going to be a broken record here. We still continue to work as a subcommittee gathering information. I feel as though we are making progress, and hopefully we'll have more to report soon.
Thank you. And Vice Chair Harris is not here. Is there any information from any other member of the body on camera?
Would you like to?
Either way,
Yeah, go ahead.
we were planning on keeping, but based on what Board Member Lethwich outlined, communication log jams, it was canceled. So we haven't met again. Our prior meeting was before our the subcommittee was before our last regular meeting, isn't that correct?
No, I think it was after. It was.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
well, then I suppose there is something. Well, what we talked about by inference, you may have gathered, was the importance of having a representative from the Berkeley Police Department, because we need to know what they need in terms of their use of body-worn cameras, they think is important, what they understand the definitions to mean, and either tighten them up, or how can we make it clear, or, you know, it requires back and forth communication, so we're very grateful now that we're gonna meet with Captain Okies, and I'm looking forward to it,
Excellent.
to making progress. It's
And then that would take us to Chair Lefwich of the Conflict of Interest Subcommittee.
Yes, so we have met a few times, and I know it's a later agenda item to consider the letter, the proposed letter to the city attorney's office, so we can just wait until then.
That works for me. That would bring us to agenda item number 9, which is new business. And 9A is discussion of the proposal to maintain the display of the land acknowledgement of the PAB meeting materials recited in its entirety during the initial regular PAB meeting of the month. I'm in favor of this, and just because in the interest of streamlining our meetings and not having to hear my words salad every meeting might help not only the community, as long as we keep the spirit and full faith of the land acknowledgement. I feel like this is something that is something we should consider. I'd love to hear everyone.
To not recite it. in its
That is
entirety.
correct.
Okay,
Once a
because
month-
this says, when you read this, it sounds like,
Yeah, I do that.
oh, okay. I'm in favor of that as well. Our meetings generally are so long. Anything we can do to be more efficient.
Yes, Board Member Levine.
I noticed in a meeting not related to Berkeley, but to another governmental agency, they have the same similar land acknowledgement, maybe modified depending on geography, but is this something that's required by state law now?
It's by the city of Berkeley. And so the city of Berkeley has placed the land acknowledgement for all commissions, all meetings, but they only do it at the first meeting of the month, and then they refer to it at the second meeting. So what we're trying to say is, should we adopt the same practice as this board?
Well, and presumptively, then there is no state law regulating this.
No,
Okay.
not that I know.
Supersede Berkeley's. Okay, yeah.
So I want to make a motion that we, that the chair or whoever's running the meeting cite the land acknowledgement at the first meeting of the month, and that it is included as in the agenda, typed out for the second and first meeting, but not recited at the second meeting.
I'll second.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Who wants to second?
From the board member
Okay,
Levine.
board member, so motion by board member Owens, and seconded by board member Levine to display the land acknowledgement on the PAB meeting materials and recite it in its entirety during the initial regular PAB meeting of the month.
Correct.
Do we have unanimous consent on that?
We do.
Yeah.
Which takes me to 9B, the recommendation to cancel July 25th regular meeting to avoid conflicting with the city council's regular meeting.
Yeah, if I may.
Please.
So we caught this earlier, we had a conflicting meeting already, but it was already too late for trying to change it, but now we could potentially avoid another showdown, and we have, folks that are interested in both of our meetings, and so we have enough meetings already scheduled throughout the year where we could do away with one, or we can reschedule it to a different date in July, so our proposal was to, unless you see otherwise, to just remove it from the calendar, that July 25th meeting.
Are we meeting in August?
You're not meeting in August,
Well, that would be my only hesitation about it.
but you do have an earlier July.
Yes, Board Member Levine.
okay, so I have a question on this. It would seem logical to cancel it, and then if we have the need of having a meeting, which board member Lefwich is pointing out is very, very possible, maybe likely, it could be described then as a special meeting, but does that then, well, that wouldn't matter, because am I correct that we have it without a regular meeting, designation to have a special meeting if needed.
Right, so yeah, at your July 12th, you can make a decision based on the workload that you may have to get a second.
Yeah.
And we'll just avoid the 20th.
Yeah, so I would move that we cancel the meeting, with the understanding that we can always create a special meeting if necessary.
I'll second that.
Can I make a comment? I also agree with that, but I guess my concern is because we don't meet in August, that's like almost 2 months that we don't have a meeting because our last meeting will be early July. And then the next following meeting wouldn't be till the second week of September. So there's a long time with no meeting. I think I counted that, I think it's 9 weeks. So that's one of my biggest concerns. I kind of think we're probably gonna have to have a special meeting, but. So yeah, that's my concern. It's just a long time between meetings.
Just board member Lee.
Yeah, do you think if we cancel, then that it's going to be too difficult to get a date where enough? We don't know if it's just going to be 4 or 5 members again, or 6 at most. So that could be a problem. So maybe I should reconsider that motion. If we can come, but how can, I'm thinking out loud here, how can we come up with a date now that's gonna be smarter?
That's why I think it's
So
good
it's-
to
Yeah, I don't,
keep it loose and.
Why
fluid,
can't we come up with a date now?
Because we don't have half the board here and that conflicting schedules. I'd have to take time out to look at my calendar, really.
Yeah.
So I'd like to propose that we table this until our next meeting. And bring this back up with some of the concerns about the time between.
okay.
And maybe, I think the suggestion of the potential special meeting is a good one. But I think we should put it in front of because like I said, it's 10 weeks.
Still on time.
Yeah.
That is a long time.
I agree.
If I may, just for the record, the original motion by board member Levine to cancel the meeting, seconded by board member Leftwich, was withdrawn. The new motion is to table this particular item until further date. Right, that's by board member Owens. Do we have a second on that?
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay, do we have a unanimous consent on that?
Yes.
We do. Okay, which brings us to agenda item C, review of the letter requesting documents and other information regarding the determination of conflict of interest by the city attorney. It's proposed by the conflict of interest subcommittee. And board member Leftwich, I'm gonna give you the floor.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, this is on page 23 of the materials. And our subcommittee decided that this would be a first good step to just write a very straightforward letter to the city attorney, asking for all written materials about how the city attorney identifies and resolves potential conflicts of interest. And if there aren't any such documents, whatever unwritten policies exist and how they're communicated, and implemented in the office. So I don't know if anybody have questions about it?
You're not. I do support this letter. Anyone wants to make a motion?
Well, I move that we accept this letter, and have it sent.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor from board member Levine, seconded by Chair Moore, to accept the letter for the request for documents and other information regarding conflicts of interest and send it to the city attorney's office. Do we have unanimous consent?
I think we do.
Motion passes.
Yes. Which brings us to item 9D. Or I'm sorry,
That's right.
it is, okay. 9D, clarification and discussion on the communication of attorney-client privilege documents and information. Board member Owens?
So I wanted to have a discussion about this because we receive guidance from the city attorney's office. And a lot of time the guidance says it's privileged and we can't share it publicly. And, I'll be quite honest, there are items where we're giving guidance that myself personally, I don't agree with. And not just that I don't agree with it, but I think there is some, I think there's some things in that guidance that the public needs to be made aware that we were given the guidance by the city attorney's office. And what we've been kind of counseled to do is to, not necessarily refer to the city attorney's guidance, but just move forward with saying, this is what, this is how we have to go forward. So it gives the impression that we have made the decision and not that we've been given that guidance. So I'll be honest, I feel pretty frustrated sometimes by that, because I think there are things that clearly members of the public need to be aware of, that this is the city attorney's view and not the board's view. But we're told it's attorney-client privilege, and I'm not sure if our new city attorney over here can address this, but my question is, who is the client? Because ultimately the city attorney's office, their number one role and priority is risk management for the city of Berkeley. And then from that, it's risk management for the police department. And then somewhere down the line, it hits the boards and commission. So we're, very far down the road when it comes to even being close to being a client and close to being their focus and what they're trying to protect. So, and this kind of goes back to the question of conflict of interest. How do we move forward with this guidance that we're given that we're not really comfortable with, that we feel like the public needs to know that's the guidance that the city attorney has given us? I guess that's really.
And perhaps it could just be that the document's privileged, meaning we can't publicly distribute it, but we can mention the contents of it.
Yeah, and I guess I don't really understand what the issue is with saying this is the city attorney's guidance.
Right.
I don't understand what the issue.
Why it's even confidential.
Yeah, why can't we say it?
Advice that they're given,
What's that?
because then they're gonna be held to the advice that they're given by other constituencies.
But if we don't say it's the advice we got from them, then it's us that's being, you know what I mean? So it's like, I just feel real frustrated by this attorney-client privilege, and I don't really understand, like I said, who is the client? I mean, because like I said, the priority is first to the council and the mayor, the city, and then the departments within the city, and somewhere way down there comes the boards and commissions. So the number one priority is to protect those entities. So sometimes I think there's a conflict in what they give us, because what they're doing is giving advice because they're trying to protect their priority client, I'll call it. So that I just feel real frustrated with that process.
Board Member Levine.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times what it boils down to is when we are seeking advice, we're essentially told what to do and not to do. And that isn't all attorney. Advice is simply that. It's to say, this is what the law says in this case, but on the other hand, it may say this in this case. And if you do this, the courts have said that. And you decide how you want to proceed, client. But that's not how it's presented. It's presented as a roadblock, essentially, and a dictate, which is not what attorney advice is supposed to be. So I think what we're attempting to do in this subcommittee is to clarify these problems and identify the bigger issues of what is in fact a conflict, as I think very well articulated by Board Member Owens, so that when appropriate, the city attorney will concede that we need to get a second opinion, essentially. So that's what we're trying to work through here, and we're hoping to have some communication that's clear from the city attorney office.
Now, I want to also add that there has been some advice or guidance given to us by the city attorney's office that's actually a interpretation of what the charter says. And for me, when I read the charter, I'm pretty black and white. When I read the words, I read the words. And their interpretation is, well, you see the words, but it's not what you see, it's something else. And that becomes kind of an issue for me, because the members of the public are reading the charter, and then, you know, I'm a member of the public just like everybody else. When I read it, I believe what it says. And we're getting this guidance behind the scenes saying, oh, no, that's not what it says.
It
So
might say
then,
that, but
yeah, but that's really not what it, yeah. So then we're operating by this guidance that we get. And then the members of the public are looking at it, it's like, yeah, but the charter says. And then they're saying, okay, well, but you can't discuss it. You can't tell the public that this is what the city attorney said, because attorney-client privilege. So I just feel like, especially when it comes to interpretation of the charter, I think the city attorney needs to come out and say, this is what the charter says, and say it publicly. Don't hide behind the attorney-client privilege, and tell the public, hey, yes, you believe that that's what it says, but no, that isn't what it says, because otherwise it falls on us. So I just think that they need to own it. If they want to say that the charter doesn't say what you read, they need to own it. That's the best.
So I am in complete agreement with that statement, Board Member Owens. I just want to let that be known. I'm gonna give Deputy City Attorney Highlands an opportunity. Welcome. I know it's your first day, but, and I know you're completely new at this, but I figure you should get an opportunity to at least address what you're gonna be hearing a lot as we move forward together.
Well, with respect to the conflict of interest issue, I am currently working on a memo, and we're discussing it internally, so that is in process. And then as to the other issues that you mentioned with respect to privilege, I will talk to Prima about it. I do not know the specifics.
Okay.
Chair, I mean,
Yes.
in,
please, Director.
we did get, earlier communication, and I believe, Board Member Ramsey, when he was still night fathers, we've never made it to the rest, but I know Board Member Ramsey asked this question, and it was directed towards him. This was a few months back when this issue came up, but at that time, they indicated that the highest body is the holder of the privilege, and the highest body through the charter is the city council. So that was the stance that was given a few months back.
They aren't always copied on the document, though. I mean, it could be an analysis that says attorney-client privilege sent to us and to the chief and the city manager. So, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So that-
if the client's not aware of what the guidance is, how could they be the client?
Right.
So, I mean, I just, the whole city attorney thing and this attorney-client privilege thing is just so frustrating, because I think they hide behind it. I'm gonna be real honest. I think they hide behind it. They tell us this stuff, and you can't tell anybody that that's what we told you. You just have to operate like that's what you believe. If you want to interpret the charter, publicly interpret it. Don't put it on us to do it. You publicly interpret it. I'm not saying that everything that they do for us should be out there, but when you're talking about interpreting the charter, which is a public document that everybody believes that this is how we operate based on what this charter says, I think the city attorney needs to publicly say, this is what the charter says. I don't think they should put that on us as board members. I think they should own it. That's just the way I feel about it.
Thank you, Board Member Levine.
Yeah, and it seems fairly obvious and transparent that if there are no cases that have interpreted the charter in the courts, this is brand new material. The court is not the city attorney's office. So who's interpretation are they given? Whose interest are they representing in giving this opinion or that opinion? It's a real concern to me that this is not the proper way attorneys communicate with the client.
I agree with Warren. I would like us to keep this on our agenda. This is something that we need to, you know, work with the DCA on, work with, you know, our community, because we do want to express to them, you know, the work we're doing and how we're going about it. And the frustration is real at times where, you know, we've been unable to do some things because of some of the opinions of the DCA. That's real. The city attorney's office. So, yes, I think that's something that we need to keep on our agenda, checking in with and looking for real solutions. At this point, should we move on to item 9E? This is notice of policy complaint number 2023 PR-000T.
If I may, Chair,
Please.
I had presented, so according to your, standing rules, once you receive a policy complaint, or sent through us, we have to present it to you. We have received one, and it's attached to the agenda at page 26, 27, or 27, 28 is the actual complaint. And then there's some supporting documentation. In page 25, we have a memo that we go to the board, and it's just giving you some background. We received this communication on April 11th. And the member of the public wrote that complaint. Based on the complaint, our initial review of it, we wanted to make sure that he understood there's a difference between a policy complaint and a misconduct complaint. So Policy Antonio and I contacted this complainant, and we asked him if he knew about these different processes, and he clarified that he is interested in a policy, not a misconduct complaint of a specific officer. He also did inform us that there has been some response about some of the issues he was trying to address, but he would still like the board to consider reviewing the policies regarding responding to members of the public, specifically when there's email sent to that general box police at City of Berkeley that info. We did inform the member of the public that we were going to be presenting it, and we informed them that he would have the opportunity to address the board. So Chair, if I may, I just want to make an announcement to our members of the public that are tuned in remotely, that if you are the individual that submitted this complaint to the board and would like to provide any additional commentary, this would be the time to do so now. Please raise your hand icon if you are the member of the public that submitted this policy complaint and would like to address it. Chair Moore, I don't see any hands raised from members of the public.
So we need to take a vote on this policy complaint. Vote, a majority vote would take us, we would accept this.
So can I just clarify something? So is the policy complaint how basically a response from the department when they use this particular email address? What is the response from the department supposed to be, or should we review that? Is that what the policy complaint is? Can somebody clarify what the complaint is, or what it is they want us to?
And couldn't we start by just asking the department tonight?
Yeah.
Rather than starting a formal complaint, I just want to know, maybe we could just hear.
Yeah, and is there already a policy?
Based on the communications, it seemed that there was a concern about just general non-responsiveness. So he provided the specific examples, but he wanted to know what were the policies within the department regarding contacted members of the public or responding back to them when they're trying to raise concerns.
Right. Do we need to open a policy complaint just to answer that?
So I guess for me, if his question is, what is the policy? Can the staff provide him with the relevant policy so he can see that? And then if, after he reviews that policy, he can point out where he thinks there's some shortfalls in that policy. We can have a discussion with the department, just to ask them, you know, hey, is this something that just happened to fall through the cracks because of, or is this, you know, something that you see could be an issue, or I'm not sure if it's time yet to open up a policy complaint.
But it sounds like you'd be doing some work, so didn't we accept it at that point? And we tried to do preliminary research, we didn't find a policy, at least within the general orders, that would address this. There's general orders that talk about officers' duties, regarding checking their emails when they're on duty, but that doesn't necessarily fit this particular concern that he's addressing, because it's not a particular officer that failed to.
Right.
It's more the general inbox.
So,
Can I ask, I'm sorry, Lieutenant Reese, could you fill us in, is there a policy for this police and cityberkeley.info account? Is there any protocols that you can think of?
Not that I know of, no. I mean, there are policies like you mentioned about checking our emails, voicemails, and things of that nature. Not familiar with anything else.
Okay.
is the captain still on?
What?
Is the captain still on?
I don't see Captain Durbin.
Okay, because I was just wondering if Lieutenant Reese, do you have any idea when somebody uses that email, where it gets directed to?
That goes to the Community Service Bureau and PIA.
Okay,
They're the ones responsible for checking them.
okay. I don't know if I'm really ready to open up a policy review. And honestly, it's, you know, as you see today, we have 4 board members here and that's a majority here. So we're down board members. We are pretty stretched.
I think we can work with the department without opening a policy review
Yeah.
to see if we can set something up.
Well, your other option, if I may, sorry, would be to accept it and delegate it to the staff to do the inquiry. You don't necessarily have to do a subcommittee for it, but that's.
Policy.
Okay, and I appreciate you bringing that up, but I'm very conscious of when we did our board retreat, one of the things that the director brought up was communication with the board about the workload that the staff has. So I want to make sure that before we kind of throw it in your plate, that you have the bandwidth to handle.
Because once
This
it's
as
a
well.
formal complaint, then doesn't that trigger a bunch of processes and obligations? So
Yeah, I
that
don't
perhaps if we kept
overload
it
you guys
informal.
either.
But I mean, it sounds like we already made headway today, and now we know that the Community Service Bureau would be, so that would now be able to focus the inquiry a little bit more. It's whatever, I just wanted to make sure you know all your options. Workload wise, I don't know that it would be a heavy lift, but then it could snowball into something, so I don't wanna make any proclamation.
So am I mistaken, but wasn't there a response that came in after this complaint was filed? If I read the materials, didn't you indicate that, director, that in fact, the police department did respond to this inquiry?
Well, after there was a few layers of activity that the complainant had to do to get a response, he enlisted another organization, and it appeared that after that organization contacted the police, and I think that he was concerned about general non-response, but also he indicated, concern for his safety there, and there wasn't any particular response. If you look at one of the emails, I believe there was an indication there, I fear for my life, on the March 22nd email, and that seemed to go unaddressed, so that's.
So can we, go ahead.
Okay. I don't think we should open a policy complaint I think that this is a difficult question to answer. He's essentially saying somebody died. I think it's suspicious. It needs to be investigated. What are you going to do? Well, that's hard to answer from the department standpoint. I'm defending the department here because, you know, out of context, without any information other than the person says I'm suspicious or it seems suspicious, there isn't a crime to investigate. I don't see enough information here to justify opening a policy complaint. That's I guess the bottom line.
I'm gonna make a motion.
Okay, before you make that motion, I'm
Okay.
just gonna say, I'm gonna disagree. I do think that because there isn't a policy in place. And, you know, if this did go unchecked, and I'm just thinking about the liability that the department would have if something did happen in that situation. Where they contacted him, I've been afraid for my life, but no one responded. And so I'm thinking about everybody's well-being at the table right there. And for that reason, I'm gonna say yes, there needs to be policy investigation.
So I want to make a motion that we have the staff look into the practice when it comes to responses to that email address and maybe get some specifics about this one particular request. And hopefully bring that back to the board and make a decision from there as to whether or not we think there should be some sort of policy review. And, you know, like I said, just talk to the department. What's the normal process? You know, what happened with this particular one? And just go from there versus just jumping into the pool. I say we just dab our feet in a little bit, have a conversation with the department. That's my,
Do we have a second?
that's my motion.
Yeah, do we have a second? Or do we have any other thoughts, friendly
Well, I have
amendments?
one other thought, although it's appropriate for me to have another thought before her motion is still there, would be as an option, if there is no policy on the books, couldn't we just write to the chief and recommend that the department come up with a policy?
So,
Yeah, we have,
Society.
we have to investigate. There
yes,
is a policy.
yes.
There's
I thought we had already investigated and there was no policy, but
But let's-
maybe we have not done enough investigation.
so yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Let's let the staff look into this. Look into what the norm is, what may have happened to this, because you know, I'll admit, we as a board, because we had the no staff in August and we had, you know, whatever in September, a lot of things we dropped, right? Because we didn't have staff in place. So we don't know what the situation is with this one particular incident. We don't know if this is just a one-off. We don't know if this is really a departmental problem and they do need a policy. We don't know anything at this point. So my thing is, let's let the staff go back and at least just ask those basic questions
Are
and then
you,
come back to us.
are you comfortable with that without us opening the
Or do you
policy?
consider that a policy?
No, if that is your direction to me and you are classifying as
Just an
Free.
inquiry.
pre-policy review work, then
Yeah, it's just an inquiry.
Sure.
Just, yeah. So
Okay, I'll
that's my
second that.
motion.
okay, so motion by board member Owens to direct staff to conduct preliminary inquiry into this policy complaint. Seconded by board member Lethbridge. Do we have unanimous consent?
We do.
Yes. Motion carried.
Excellent. Which takes us to 9F, discussion concerning the memo from DPA Aguilar to council titled delays in ODPA work production due to BPDA adherence to charter deadlines. I know this was Vice Chair Harris wanted to lead this discussion. But I'm gonna see if the director would like to pick this up and run with this a little bit.
Sure, just providing context, as we know, city council had a special meeting regarding appointments for the fire chief and for the BPD chief. There was a lot of community discussions leading up to that. City council members reached out to me. I know board members, we the board members motion to write a letter expressing concerns. So all of this occurred within that context. One particular councilor, Councilmember Harrison, spoke with me, asked me some questions about some of these access and the experience related to our work. And I indicated some of these different things that we have experienced, and I outlined in particular instances where some of the work product was delayed. And I shared that information with her through a memo. That was subsequently shared with the full council and city manager and the chief of police. Chief of police raised some concerns. I had the opportunity to talk with her. Since that, in trying to address some of the concerns, I wrote a follow-up memo to you and to also share it with the council, with the chief, just so that there's no misunderstandings about what that limited scope document was. It was not an assessment of the overall relationships. It was more focused on particular work related to the board and the office and how it has been in ways impacted by what I classified as some non-compliance issues. So the subsequent memo provides a little bit more context and background on how to read the law, because I understood from the chief's feedback that maybe and this is not her words, but now hearing her feedback, I'm the one that wrote it, so I can see that I know I understand it, but maybe not everybody did. The color coding, what I meant by some classifications. So that's what hopefully that second memo did to explain that.
Does anyone have any questions, any follow-ups with this? Is everyone caught up? All right. So that takes us to G, recommendation to establish a subcommittee dedicated to reviewing charter section 125. Roger.
Okay. So I may have mentioned that I have a regular conversation with if not with the mayor, with somebody from his staff. Anthony Rodriguez, it's his senior policy person, but in our most recent meeting, the mayor suggested, based on the public feedback that I've been giving, him, but also the public feedback that community members and members of the public have been given, that there are some areas in the charter that need to probably rectify. One phrase that independent counsel in Charlottesville use, which I take it with me, and I'm sure the legal scholars probably in the room appreciate it, but in some ways the charter is boxing with itself, and we need to clean that up a little bit. So this would be pretty much that step to that, to formally establish a subcommittee that can look systematically at what needs to be cleaned in the charter. And I know that we all have made observations. The conflict of interest is related also to language in the charter. So there's a lot of different things that I think could be addressed further.
So, Director Aguilar, I'd like to say that I think it would be an important subcommittee, but I think that the subcommittee should also consist of someone from the city attorney's office, or from the police department, and hopefully from the union, to be part of that conversation, because that charter impacts, and members of the community as well, because that charter impacts, several different entities. And I want to make sure we're all on the same page with understanding what that charter says. And, like I said, I'm hopeful that we can get all the interested parties in a room and come up with a charter that's a lot more understandable and more capable that we can work with.
Although I hear what you're saying, but it might be more productive to start out initially with a subcommittee that just identifies the issues, and then we bring it to, because there's a lot of ambiguity in the charter, and
But see, you're making the assumption the only people that have an issue with the charter is us. We don't know if the department has an issue with the charter. We don't know what the community members' issues are with the charter. We don't know what the union's issues are with the charters.
Right.
So, you know, if we come in with here's what we think, that's different than here's what we all think, and here's where we all think we can strengthen this thing. Because like I said, it's not just us that's impacted. So that's why I think it's important to get all of the stakeholders, including the city attorney's office, as part of this, you know, review of this charter. I think it's important to get everybody in the room. So when we do walk out, hopefully one day, it probably won't be quick, but one day we can walk out with everybody feels comfortable with what that charter says and the role of this board and the role of all the other stakeholders in this process.
I think it's not so much what it says, but what it should say or what it needs to say, because it sounds to me like we're talking about changes, right? I think part of it would need to go back to the voters. I think there's some things that,
You know, any
Oh,
change
but
we
I
make.
thought we were told that there's some things that the council can, no, nothing.
There's stuff through ordinance, but it can't,
You can't change the charter.
right,
You have
right.
to go back to the
They can
vote.
specify through ordinance, some authority, I think was the language, but they can't necessarily take
Right.
away. Right.
Right, so I don't think it's so much, we're all gonna agree what it says, because I think it's not clear what it says, and I think we've identified issues and things that we think it should say, so.
Remember the meeting.
Maybe I'm a pessimist, but I see competing interests too dominant to reach consensus. If that's the goal, which is what I'm hearing, that's the wish. I don't know if that's possible, because I think interpretation depends on whose interest you're advocating for, essentially. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I actually do think that ordinance F, which is identifying a problem that I see a little differently, but it's the same thing in a way. It's what needs to be clarified. And I may want it to be clarified one way, but the city attorney may be interested in clarifying it another way. And the police a third way, or so, and we're not going to be able to negotiate through, are we? I mean, is that something that's possible? It seems like a
I
big
mean,
ask.
It's a huge ask, but let's, and then I hear the pessimism, and I'm gonna approach it from a little bit of an optimistic perspective. And that's only because, you know, after talking with the president of the BPA, after sitting down and speaking with the chief, and everybody has said that they have a buy-in and that they want to work this thing out. I'm gonna hold everyone to that. Like,
Okay.
we're talking about making this process easier on everybody. We all have things that we need to work on together. If we're talking about sitting down, which is what we've actually, you know, already initially negotiated, is let's sit down before the 30-day implementation of new policy and procedure. That was big for the BPA to, you know, give up. And for us to sit down and say, hey, let's see if there is a way. At least we'll know that there's an impasse and we can take it from there. And I think we have to do that. It's our own due diligence. That's what we need to do to say,
Well, so-
hey, we try to.
Just the mechanics of that, though. Then let's say you can butt your heads and really do come up with some compromise and decide this is how we're all going to agree it's going to work. But then there has to be something in writing. There has to be some kind of ordinance or.
Right, the city council's ultimately the one.
Right,
Or we take it back to the.
it goes back to the vote.
But I think the city council was the one that approves the charter language.
Yeah, and then it goes to the vote. So.
Right, but I mean, there's lots of,
Yeah, this is not, this particular subcommittee or group of people that work on this is not a short subcommittee. I mean, you're essentially rewriting the charter. It's
Yeah.
basically what you're doing. And I hear your pessimism, but the fact that we sit with the charter in front of us tells me that somebody sat in a room and came up with something. So it's possible to do it. Is it always gonna be that we all agree that, yes, we all love it, you know, it's just sweet as pie? I don't think that's possible. Like I said, we have competing interests. But I think we can get in a room, at least I can get in a room and come up with something where I can feel good about it. I might not feel perfect, but I can feel good and I can compromise, and I'm hoping the other side can compromise as well. And we all, and when I say other side, I'm talking about the city attorney's office, I'm talking about citizens, I'm talking about everybody that sits in that room. If we can all come up with, you know what, this is not 100% what I want, but I can sleep with this.
But I think
You know,
to
I
even
can-
get there, we have to know, we haven't even all come up with a list of things.
But you don't even know what the citizens' issues are. You
No, I
don't
know, but I feel like we need to get our act together first and know what we've identified. And then presumably the department would have its own list, and the union and everybody, the city attorney's office, and then we come together. But I feel like it's kind of premature.
Well, here's where this conversation is good and where we've already found consensus. We know we need to tackle this, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we can sit here right now and create a subcommittee that is going to be a long-term project, that is going to take a lot of time, and we don't have the human power to really do right now.
Yeah.
But we can prepare it. I think it's a great recommendation. I support it, Director. We know we have to take a look at the charter. And we can figure out how we do that, how we process the policy. But we know we have to take a look at it. So that's what we're here for right now, this very moment, is to decide if this is something we should do. What do you guys think?
I'll make a motion that we establish a subcommittee.
I will second that,
And can I ask for clarification?
of course.
So based on what you just said, your description, which sounds good, presumably the subcommittee will come up with these questions that need to be answered, where the lack of clarity is, what needs to be changed, et cetera.
And I think the
Okay.
subcommittee will spend
That's
a lot
the
of
first
time
step.
bringing that to the full
Yeah.
board.
And I think board member Calavita should be the chair, since she's not here. But really,
I'm totally okay with that.
she knows a lot about it.
We don't have to name a chair right now. We can form a subcommittee without a chair, correct?
That's
Or
correct.
without populating it.
Can we
even.
form, I thought we could only make the motion that we create a subcommittee, but we couldn't put people on it until like the following meeting. I thought that
Right,
happened.
well, we didn't agendize it that way, so that would be the issue. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
And then we got two members now, so.
perfect.
Let's defer the
Let's defer.
populating.
I love it.
But the motion we have to vote on, so motion to establish a subcommittee by board member Owens, seconded by board member Moore. Do we have unanimous consent? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Excellent. So that takes us to new business, letter H, recommendation for a budget allocation for additional staff for the position of investigator, communications specialist.
So this also came out of discussions and with the mayor and also with one of my tasks within my first few months was to co-create an evaluation for the role of the director. That's still happening. We're gonna be going to closed session soon. I have presented something to the mayor. I don't know the full mechanics of all that personnel stuff, but I'm sure that I'm all for transparency. So if and when there's approval of that, we'll make sure the board members, even the public have it, because I think it's important to have metrics that people can hold me accountable. But in doing that exercise, I was taking stock of the office and finding out where our strengths and weaknesses are. One of the things I saw that the charter is very ambitious with a lot of the things that it wants the board members in the office to do. We don't necessarily, but we're utilizing the same resources, from previous model. So we're trying to really make sure the resources are caught up to the language of the charter. Previously, there was a recommendation for 2 investigators for an additional investigator, and that ultimately, I don't know the full history, but that somehow got converted into the data analyst role. But I still believe that it's important to have a second investigator for a few reasons. I mentioned that there's different departments and guidance about using ratios of investigators to sworn officers. I'm not necessarily advocating for that. I don't know that I could make my justification through that. But at the very least, I think we should have parity with internal affairs. We do similar work. We had the similar investigative process. And it could be very tedious, just body worn camera review alone takes a lot of time. And there's also the added task of coordinating with members of the board to review that body worn camera. Doing that for only one investigator and or tapping into me or somebody else from the office really takes away from that. So if there's two people on that, in that division of the office, I think it would be better for all parties involved, for the officers, for the members of the public, for the board members, for everybody, and ensuring timeliness, which, you know, we did take that, that we had that unfortunate situation where we weren't able to finish for different factors, one of the investigations. So that's also recognizing that we can be in a better place if we have a different investigator. The other thing, as much as I love doing outreach and I want to do more of it, I realize that I haven't been able to do it successfully just because so many different things that I keep getting pulled. So to be able to address, but I believe that the communication specialist would help me really organize our communication strategy, not only for the board, for the office as well, being able to do that outreach. I didn't want to create a new classification, so I reviewed the city's classifications, and I thought there was enough language there that there was a balance of being able to serve as a PIO and also screen. We get a good amount of media inquiries, and sometimes I don't always respond as fast as I'd like to, and I try to share with the chair, you know, in a timely manner. But I think just being able to streamline that process would be helpful. But also another part of element of the communication specialist role is to get out in the community, do those contacts to set up the meetings. Right now, I've been lucky that I've done some outreach, but I can't necessarily take the credit that it was self-initiated. So it was more reactive, and I want to be at a point where our office and the board can, and this came up in the retreat as well, that there's a hunger for doing more outreach, and I think we can do it if we have this position. So that's in general, that's the essence of that recommendation. If you have any questions or comments, I'm happy to take it.
Is that a full-time position, the communications?
That's what the recommendation is for. The alternative language, there give some alternatives to, and I formatted that memo in the same format that we do the staff reports to council. So the alternatives, if you look at page 43, is alternative actions to consider is to provide additional funding, if not for full-time, for part-time employees, for investigator and communication specialist, or to provide additional funding to hire temporary staffing where we have projects that they need to be addressed. But my preference would be for the full-time. I think we can have better outcomes that way, but those would be the alternative actions.
And you think that those needs are stronger than the need for another policy person? I mean, I don't have a sense of your internal workload and.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think the situation with the policy, part of it is working with the board and in the office internally to really plan out what the workload is, what that looks like for that person. Right now, very lucky that Jose has been very he has a lot of self-initiative, so he looks for ways to contribute. But as we're formalizing this role a little bit more, we're identifying ways where we could streamline. I think if we there's some roles that he's doing that's beyond what I think I would like for him to, or that person in that role to do. So if once we get caught up with the full-time investigator and the communication specialist, I think we can have him dedicated solely on that, and that will kind of stabilize that position.
That's great.
So I want to make a couple of comments. I'm not sure if we need a second investigator, only because one of the things that you haven't brought up is how many complaints do we get? And how have complaints been trending? Are they trending down? Are they trending up? So that's one of my questions, but I can see, when it comes to this investigator, another alternative, which is you have somebody that, you know, when the need, is there, that they do investigations, but when the need is there, they support the policy side. So they're kind of a hybrid, which Jose sort of does a little bit now. But instead of, you know, saying this is only an investigator, but this is somebody that can operate under either hat, because I can definitely see there would be times where you need another investigator, but I don't think it's all the time. But I also think there would be time where you need another policy person. So I think if you had somebody that you can flex, I think that would be, to me, that would be a good option. With the communication person, I think it's a great idea. I think, you know, just some of the communication that you as director has to do could be offloaded to this person. We've been talking about our website and what we want on that website. That's something that person can be the lead on, and getting that website and any other marketing related to the board, and actually putting information in front of the board about community meetings that are out there, that they can get in contact with people. Hey, would you like a board member to attend that? When is it? Where is it? But that person can just be that communication liaison for the board and the community, the board and the departments. You know, but I think that communication, I think that's a good one. But with the other one, I'm wondering if it should be more of a flexible investigator / policy person.
I would not be opposed to it. Like, I'd like to have a system where people are cross-trained within our department to be able to pick up. And, you know, we're a small unit, so, you know, hey, can you put that down and help us with this? But I think that would be very valuable, like you said. And one thing too, though, just the realities of the workplace, you know, if my investigator's out on leave, then there's nobody else but me to take up that investigation, so I have to put other stuff down. So for those reasons, I think I do like the second investigator, but I do think, like you said, there's opportunity to use them for other stuff beyond investigation.
Do you think that if someone in Jose's capacity would be able to, if they didn't have the other distractions, focus on policy and be just policy driven, would that be okay? Or, you know, like, he wears many hats, right? If you only wore one hat,
Right.
would that be more efficient for you to only have one policy analyst? And what do you need more?
Yeah.
You tell me.
Yeah.
Do you need an investigator more or a policy analyst?
I think I like the second investigator, but with the understanding that there would be having additional duties. Now, the charter talks about a chief investigator. So that's also interesting to me. That implies that it's investigative unit, you have more than one investigator. So, and right now, the classification is only investigator, so I don't really have a chief investigator with proper role. But at least now, then we'll have that. It's also within the division of labor in the office, I'm the one supervisor for these. It's a small department, obviously, but you know, there's no buffer per se. So if we have the second investigator, one of them potentially could be promoted to the chief investigator, then and then they could also serve as / deputy role. If I need to step away, then they can still oversee the office. Right now, we don't have that proper chain of command. So
I do like board member Owen's idea, though, about maybe not being quite so rigid in the description of the position. And hire someone who has more generalized skills, who could do that. You know, maybe it's investigator / whatever, but.
Yeah, we're not gotcha.
I know you're the one who to recognize me that this is really the director's item here. And he's, I think, the person most interested for good reason. But I heard you describe the new hire, the chief investigator, is in fact somebody from NACO. Didn't you say that? His background is that he had a role in that organization?
He's currently a board member in it.
Okay, well, it seems as though he has a hand very close to policy issues, because that's really where I would go for policy questions, for the oversight bodies is to NACOL. So I'm not saying change his job, but he is kind of uniquely qualified to assist in kind of developing this hybrid position. And what I would hope that he could facilitate that if you hired somebody as a new investigator, but maybe in this kind of hybrid role.
I think that's why I kind of like the whole hybrid thing, because then you're not pigeonholing your staff into a specific role. Because let's say, for example, something comes up as policy related and our new investigator has a real strong background from the NACO process in that particular policy. I'd hate to say, well, he's the investigator, so we have to have a policy person do that. So that's why, I mean, I realize that, you know, they've been hired as investigator in policy, but just having some way to say, when we need you for, you know, when your strength is here, we'd like you to step up. Or like you say that, you know, the policy person takes off for whatever reason, vacation, then this hybrid person or whoever can take that role on while they're gone. That's why I'm afraid of pigeonholing somebody into investigator versus policy when they do kind of
Here's
sometimes
my
overlap.
question about that is, will the city need you to have definitions of what
Yeah.
actually?
So, yeah, that was my point. So right now,
But
we
there are-
can utilize the classifications that we have,
Management analyst.
management analyst
Right.
and investigator. And that, but those attract different candidates, and there's different eligibility is associated with it. I think we have and I can still use the investigator eligibility list, and I saw some really unique and helpful skill set that I would like to draw from in there. What we can do, they don't have to, there's any job description has other duties as assigned. So there's wiggle room, even if the classification is investigator, when we actually do the duties, there's wiggle room there, that there's the understanding that you're not fully an investigator, that you also cross-trained as this policy person. And then I would review the eligibility list with that mindset that this is who we're seeking.
Well, I mean, could you just hire the person as a management analyst and not hire him as an investigator and use that job description as a management analyst? And sometimes they have the investigator hat on, sometimes they have the policy hat on. And sometimes they might back up the communication person. I mean, sometimes they might, you know, take some load off of you. I mean, I just think because the department is so small that it needs to be flexible. That's all I'm saying.
No, and I hear you, but it doesn't always work out the same
I hear
way. That
Yeah.
I think from at least from what I've seen, the eligibility is there was more ways to have an investigator at least from the candidates. We could open it up if none of fit this particular hybrid function we're trying to do, but it was to go to make candidates from investigator position to also be able to do other duties, but I didn't necessarily see the folks in the management analysts were in a particular track that we would need to almost start new to train them on investigative duties, which we can do it. But I think that if we position ourselves to have an investigator that can also do policy, I think it might be easier in terms of internal operations than going the other way around.
So my thought is, I respect the director's request for this, and how he's going about doing it. So I respect that he understands how he can manage that staff. So I'm all for this. I can see value in having, I'm making the request for 2 more positions.
And procedurally, this is the way it works. We adopt a resolution.
Procedurally, this is our council. So in this format, we can give, I think, a cleaner alternative. You can do the letter. which have you been communicating, but in this particular track, because we're asking for new personnel, I think that following the city council's format is just gonna streamline the process.
Please.
Director. So last year, we had a budget committee, and I was on it, and board member Owens was on it, and we had some of this kind of conversation, and we made a proposal. Are we gonna, we said this much for this, we said we want this kind of, this many of this job description and investigator and what they should be called and which category they should go in. Are we gonna do that too, or is this in lieu of that?
This would be in lieu of that, so this would be taking my recommendation and sending it
Okay.
to council.
It's a little more efficient in a way. And
Yes.
straightforward. Okay, so I'm in favor.
Yeah, last year when we were doing it, so my understanding is the city does a 2-year budget.
Yes,
And so last year we did it, that was working on a 2-year budget, which is kind of more detailed.
Yeah.
And that was asking for funds for, to support like our training and blah, blah,
Right.
blah. So this is kind of like supplemental to that, so. Especially now that we have a new director, this is what we want to layer on top, but I would think that the following year, when the new 2-year budget is done, that there'd be another budget subcommittee to have
Okay.
that kind of discussion.
I'm just
So-
wondering, just one last
Okay,
thing.
one last thing, and then I'm gonna ask, we move on.
Okay. Board member Owens had asked about the number of complaints, and if I were on the city council and I looked at this, I would say, well, how many complaints are you getting? Are you saying that there, one of one investigator can't handle all the complaints?
yeah.
So. And I don't know what the answer to those questions, but if I were on the state council, I'd ask that, and I'm just wondering if maybe they should be worded a little more broadly. You say increase in workload, but especially if we're talking about the duties of this person being a little broader.
Okay, I can certainly, I don't have the exact number for you at this meeting. I would wanna just caution anybody doing in this work that the numbers, they don't always tell the full story because it's the quantitative aspect does it. The qualitative aspect of doing investigations is very different. So you might have 30 investigations a year, but how many allegations that you have? How many body worn cameras? So those particular aspects of, and some investigations are more straightforward than others. But I think focusing on the total number of complaints a year doesn't always tell the full story.
Right, I'm just saying that these whereases, these findings or whatever you call them, doesn't necessarily say that. So unless you really need for this to be voted on tonight, I would suggest that maybe you broaden it a little bit, because I believe you, and I know how busy your office is. But if it's just asking for an investigator, I can just see the council asking that, and rather than you having them to respond, you might put that in here so that it's clear from the document.
So,
And just to follow up on that, I think the fact that 1 versus 2 is very significant, because we had a particular problem because there was a lengthy period that our 1 investigator was unavailable. We have timelines,
Right.
and timelines are critical and can't be met if somebody gets ill or has, some.
And that should go in there too, I think, because that, they wouldn't necessarily think about that, the
important
timeline,
for them to know.
I
One,
think,
it is really burdensome, just because you're not 24/7.
well, I think that information, including the workload stuff, should be in your council report, which is on page 41. So, I mean, you have some of the stuff in here that kind of details, why you want the communication person. So maybe just layer some of that stuff into the council report, because the resolution doesn't need to have the detail. The council report should have that detail.
right?
I think that's a great. way
So
to-
I make a motion that we support the director in requesting 2 more staff members.
I second that.
So motion to adopt the resolution for additional staff. Made by board member Owens and seconded by Chair Moore. With also with the commentary that the explanatory memo to the council will detail more information about the need for the secondary investigation.
Yes,
Perfect.
Do we have unanimous consent?
yes.
Yes.
Well, let me say one thing. Is there any, if we're saying the votes, does it make any difference that their absences or does that? I'm just wondering, is it,
On the resolution,
well, because it says
yeah.
voting results usually,
Okay, and we'll modify it to reflect the true vote. So if they were, right there, so we'll modify the resolution and then we'll send it to the chair to sign it to reflect what happened at the meeting.
Okay, excellent. That takes us to. Let's back over agenda item 10,
Chair, can I make a request for a 5-minute break?
of course. Can we take a 5-minute break, everyone, and be back here exactly at 8:30?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Sure. This brings us back to our agenda item 10. This is training on Graham v. Connor.
And if I may, Chair,
Please.
I'm having technical difficulties. For whatever reason, I'm not able to log into my work computer right now, which I need to plug the HDMI cord into the projector. But if I can make a note on this, Flexi, if you're not familiar with it, and also for members of the public, is the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. And initially, when I put this item on the agenda, there were a lot less items to consider, so I wanted to start taking advantage if and when we have short agendas to squeeze in a little training, not only for members of the board, but for members of the public on very important topics. If you're not familiar with Flexi, it's a great resources where they send, it's a training academy where they send most of the federal law enforcement officers. They also allow us to attend as civilian oversight practitioners. I had the opportunity before to attend some of the remote trainings, so I'm also looking forward to giving you updates about those training opportunities as I see them. They in some instances they're not always done locally, so they're federal, so they do it in different places. They do come to California sometimes. But what's on the agenda, excuse me, is what they refer to as Flexi Talks. So think of them as TED Talks, but they're focused on particular case laws that relates to law enforcement. In Graham v. Connor, if you are familiar to anybody who's not familiar, is a very important case that establishes how to evaluate claims of excessive force and reasonableness. And it's also what the department and their policies are abiding by when we're talking about force. So and these are another thing I like about them, they're bite sized. So this is only 15 minutes. And it really gets down to the basics of it. It's not intended though to be full length, training. There's obviously more discussions that we need to have, but just getting the basics down is important. So if and whenever we have a shorter agenda, we'll definitely put it out there. I'm also gonna send you the links for and how to access these different Flexi Talks. And if you want to look at them at your leisure, please let me know, fill out the form to get credit for it.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. And I'm just saying, thank you, warrior gods. This brings me to agenda item number 11, which is public comment.
Okay, so we have no members of the public present with us at the North Berkeley Center, so we're opening it up to the members of the public via Zoom. We do have one raised hand icon, so I'm going to go ahead and allow the individual to speak. If you bear with me, I'm just getting my timer. Are we doing 3 minutes or 2 minutes, Chair?
3 minutes.
I won't be able to play the time on the screen, but I will notify you when you have 1 minute remaining. So first we have Apostle Victor, and I am going to allow you to talk. Apostle Victor, the floor is yours.
All right, this is Apostle Victor, and my comment is going to be very brief. And I'm so impressed with what the board is doing, and I just want to say thank you for what you are doing, and that's all I have to say. Yeah.
Nice.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the public that are interested in addressing the board at this time? Please raise your hand icon. Chair Moore, I don't see any additional hands raised at this time.
All right, not seeing or hearing any other hands from the community, I'm going to move to agenda item 12, which is case updates. And that will bring us to closed session for the evening. Pursuant to the court order in Berkeley Police Association, the City of Berkeley, County Superior Court case number 2002-057-569, the board will recess into closed session to discuss and act on the following matters. Updates.
Thank you. And for members of the public, be advised that we will be stopping the recording. We will be muted and you will not be able to see our discussions because we're in closed session, but we will return at the end to close off the public section of the meeting.